Hi guys, it's Reagan and welcome back to another video. Today's video is one of my favorite to make every single year. That's right guys, today I'm going to be chatting through the top books I want to read this fall. Fall, autumn, my favorite season of the year, my favorite reading season of the year, just the vibes, the atmosphere, mostly artificially created now that I live in Texas, but nevertheless, I love fall. I have collected quite the stack of books of titles that I predominantly already had on my shelf. To be told, there are so many books I want to read during this fall season. My reading does also tend to pick up a lot, so outside of these books, I plan to read much more than this as well. But before we dive into the books I'm most excited to read this fall, first a word from this video sponsor, which is Wraithmark Creative. I'm so excited to be working with Wraithmark Creative for this video because I'm going to be shouting out such a special Kickstarter campaign of one of my all-time favorite releases that's also a perfect fall read. That's right, Wraithmark Creative has just officially launched their Kickstarter for a special limited edition of Legends and Lattes by Travis Beldry, one of my favorite cozy fantasy reads and just an all-time perfect fall read in my opinion. Wraithmark Creative is known for their beautiful special editions that they release. One of my personal favorites is this edition of Mark of Kings. I mean, look at this leather-bound books, the edges, the ribbon bookmark. I mean, these books are truly works of art. They also have one of their newer Kickstarter novels, which is Neon Ghosts, which is another really beautifully constructed hardcover. But this particular edition of Legends and Lattes has so many different bells and whistles, so let's go through them. First off, it of course has a custom dust jacket with original art, with embossing and glossing. It also has a cloth-bound case which features additional art, gold gilded edges along the book too, ribbon bookmarks as well as colored end sheets, custom interior design and illustrations. There's illustrations throughout the book as well, which are stunning. A deluxe bookmark that's sent to you, and so much more. All of the details about what's going to be featured within this Kickstarter and for this special release of Legends and Lattes will be linked down below in the Kickstarter page if you guys want to learn more. But if you haven't heard of Legends and Lattes, it's basically a cozy fantasy story following our main character Viv, who's kind of tired living her life as a mercenary, so she decides to settle down in a small town and open up her own cozy coffee shop. It's about friendship, it's about second chances, it's about discovering delicious recipes that we as the reader will just absolutely want to recreate for ourselves. There's so much to love about this particular book, absolutely endearing and truly the perfect read to curl up with in front of a fire on a chilly morning. I cannot wait to have this beautiful edition to have from my shelf. And again, if you guys want to learn more, I'll have it linked down below. But thank you so much to Wraithmark Creative for sponsoring this video. I love this project and I love you guys so much. But let's go ahead and dive back into the books I'm personally most excited to read for this fall. The first book that's on my list I feel like is going to be charming and heartwarming and just a great book to curl up with and hopefully a chilly evening, and that is The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. I read The Psalm for the Wild Built earlier this year by this author and absolutely adored it. The first two books in her sort of novella sci-fi series. Becky Chambers has this way of creating such charming characters in sci-fi settings, banter and dialogue as well. I truly adored those two books so much. I knew I wanted to jump into her backlog of books as soon as I possibly could. A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet is a book that I feel like I've heard so much about for many years. Many people love this book and I have a feeling I'm gonna love it too. But this story follows our main character Rosemary Harper, and when she joins the crew of Wayfarer, she isn't really expecting much. The patched up ship has seen better days, but it offers everything she could possibly want in life, a spot that she can call home, and a way that she'll be able to explore the far reaches of the galaxy while also not having to really confront her past. However, though, things are kind of turned upside down a bit when Rosemary joins the crew. Not only is everyone a little quirky, a little unexpected, but they're also offered an opportunity of a lifetime to basically explore black holes, which is a very dangerous job, which is not what Rosemary was looking to do when she signed on to this crew. From there, we watch Rosemary and the crew of Wayfarer journey through the galaxy together. I feel like this book is going to be full of so much found family humor. I feel like it's going to delight me. I just cannot wait to pick this book up. I feel like it's going to be a perfect book to put a smile on my face. It's exactly what I need because the next book that's on my TBR is going to destroy every fiber of my heart, and that is Assassin's Fate by Robin Hobb. By this point in the year, I have read the first two books within this trilogy. I loved them both immensely. It is the final trilogy of the Robin Hobb universe, which I have been reading now for about 3 years. I am heartbroken that this is coming to an end, but I love loved the final 2 installments so much. I have flown through them despite how hard I tried to like savor and really take my time with them. So I've reached the 3rd book. I've reached the conclusion. I'm not ready, I am not okay, but I'm really dying to see what's going to happen with Fitz and the Fool and their final quest and journey together. Robin Hobb is just the best. Her writing, her characterization, her pacing can truly do no wrong. This is also my favorite cover of the series, which is kind of fun given that it's the last book. I don't know, I'm not ready to find out the assassin's fate. Watch me finish this and just immediately restart the Farseer trilogy because I feel like that could definitely happen, but this is also on my TBR. Next up, I have a few fantasy series I'm also looking to start now that I did wrap up a few over the course of the summer. The first book is Best Served Cold by Joe Abercrombie. I read the first trilogy, the First Law trilogy by this author. I think I wrapped that up earlier this year or the tail end of last year, and I'm really looking forward to starting the rest of the books that he has in this universe or in this world. This, I believe, is actually a standalone novel, and we follow our main character who is a mercenary, and her name is Monza Mercado, and she is one of the most well-known and talented mercenaries in all the land, but unfortunately for her, she got a little too popular because she was betrayed by her previous benefactor, thrown off a mountain. She's basically left at the beginning of the story with a broken body and a deep, burning passion for revenge. And from there, she kind of puts together a ragtag group of individuals who appear to be rather unexpected based on their description in the synopsis, and you see her set out to achieve this revenge, and everything about this sounds like everything I could possibly want. First and foremost, I love Joe Abercrombie's character-focused, grimdark fantasy worlds. I feel like he makes really fascinating scenarios with characters that are rather unpredictable, given that their moral compass is not necessarily one that you can pin down, incredibly likable, but also tending to be very dark. I love that this is a mercenary focused story. I also feel like there's going to be a few Easter eggs to the First Law trilogy I'm excited to decipher and find out for myself. Nevertheless, I am so thrilled to continue on with my Joe Abercrombie read for this year. This will for sure be being read hopefully soon. I also finally want to get to Malice by John Gwynne. I feel like this has been on a few seasonal TBRs because it really has been very top of mind for me, especially now that I finished the Legends of the First Empire series. I'm really itching for another like completed, rather long fantasy series I already know many people have read and enjoyed. I'm up to date on John Gwynne's other Viking-inspired fantasy series, so I'm looking for another one by this author. His combat writing in particular is incredibly impressive and also rather horrifying. This is set in a shattered and broken world where conflict between men and giants have kind of like ruined everything. The land has been deeply steeped in blood. It appears we follow 4 main characters from different war bands, all seeking different things from fame to glory to revenge, and I'm pretty sure their fates and destinies will become rather intertwined. This is a structure that John Gwynne appears to really enjoy, and one that I've enjoyed in terms of how he's written it in the past. I've heard so many good things about Malice. I feel like I'm gonna really like this, and I love a cold, brutal landscape, especially when it's getting colder outside, so I feel like this could be a really fun one. I also have the sequel on hand, so hopefully I can have a bit of a marathon session, but I really want to read this too. It's the fall, so obviously I have to have a few witchy books on my TBR. The first is Everyone Knows Your Mother is a Witch by Rivka Gauchin. This appears to be like a literary fiction, historical leaning story, and what's really interesting about this fiction story is that it's very much inspired by true historical events. So while the story itself is not real, the author apparently pulls from a lot of real source material to inform like the actual narrative that is going on. The story begins in 1618 in a small town in Germany. The 30 Years' War has commenced, and fear and suspicion are very much in the air across the entirety of the Holy Roman Empire. And at the beginning of this book, our main character Catherine is being accused of a witch, an illiterate widow who has very successful children and is also known in town for having not only strong opinions but lots of herbal remedies. She has gained the attention and the suspicion of the town, and this, I believe, is her story. Again, I'm really intrigued by this. I feel like the writing style is going to be fantastic. I also love that it's pulling from real history. I feel like typically in the fall I read more like fun leaning witchy stories, but a kind of darker, truly inspired one as well I feel like could be really cool to read too. Next up, I have a more cozy leaning witch story, and that is The House Witch. In the story, we follow our main character Finley, who is just trying to keep a low profile. He's recently accepted a new job as being the cook for the king and queen in the fantasy land that he lives in, and he's quickly singled out as being an enigma. Despite just wanting to kick people out of his kitchen and cook delicious and uncanny meals, his secret identity does not stay secret for very long, and he's quickly pulled into a variety of of politics within the castle itself, from fighting against unchivalrous knights to protecting the pregnant queen. Our main character Finley's life gets complicated very, very quickly. I love that this book appears to be predominantly taking place within a castle keep and all of the different dynamics that can take place in this space. I feel like it could be a really fun mix of magic and politics while still being very lighthearted just based on the synopsis. This is a rather beloved book, and I also believe it's a series, so I'm just really intrigued by it. I feel like this could be a really delightful, easy read, a palate cleanser between some of my more intense books I want to read this fall. Next up, I have A Fire Endless by Rebecca Ross. I read A River Enchanted a few years ago now and truly loved it so much. The fact that I have not gotten to the sequel and final book within this duology is confusing to me because I loved the writing style, I loved the ambiance, but let's just say I was holding off because it would just make a truly perfect fall read. In A River Enchanted, which is book 1 to this series, we're introduced to one of our main characters who is a bard. He left his island home about 10 years prior to travel to the mainland to begin his training to become a bard. At the beginning of book 1, he's called to return back home to help with an investigation that has been troubling the island. The island in which our main character is from is an unusual one. The land itself is cursed. Essentially, there are two different groups of people that have both lived on this island for a long time, and for as long as anyone can remember, they have hated each other. Due to this, a curse has formed where one side of the island is very lush and you're able to grow food, it's very bountiful, but the magic itself is very dangerous and hurts magic users, whereas on the other side of the island, the land is barren, but the magic itself is very, very powerful. At the beginning of this book, young children begin to disappear on the island, and our main character travels back and has to work with his childhood arch nemesis to try to figure out what's going on. This island is full of nature and wild magic and so much mystery. It's also multi-POV, so you're reading from a variety of characters all living here. It's very emotional, very beautifully written. I love Rebecca Ross's writing. I just feel like she truly can do no wrong. I just feel like she creates so much atmosphere and romance in all of her fantasy stories, and as I said, I loved River Enchanted. I loved how it centered storytelling, and I need to figure out how it's going to conclude, so we need to read this book. The next book that's on my TBR is The Cage of Dark Hours by Marina Lostetter. It's book 2 to The Helm of Midnight, which is a very spooky, like, thriller fantasy read. If you haven't read The Helm of Midnight, I highly recommend maybe adding it to your fall TBR because I feel like it's a perfect combination of genres for the fall season. I loved the first one, and I'm really looking forward to jumping into book 2, as the ending was rather explosive, but to take a step back to let you know what this series is about, it's basically like a horror fantasy mixed with an investigation. It's set in a fantasy world where the magic centers around magical objects. Essentially, individuals can imbue masks with their ability and power, and then people can put on these masks to access this information. For example, if you're a really good doctor, you can put your skill in surgery in a mask, and people can access it after your death. Fast forward though, we're introduced to our main character Krona, who is part of the Regulators. The Regulators is a group of individuals in this world who are tasked with protecting and regulating all the magical objects that exist in this city. At the beginning of this book though, a very dark and powerful mask was stolen, and this mask was actually of a very famous serial killer from many years prior. At the beginning of book 1, his killings begin to haunt the streets once again. This book is dark and spooky and scary. It also has a really evolving plot that really balloons really, really quickly. I'm really excited to see how the plot is going to continue itself into book 2, but if you want something that's going to get your heart racing and also has a really cool magic system, this is such a great series to read. Next up, I have some spookier leaning reads I really hope to read as well. First up is How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix. This is Grady Hendrix's newest release, I want to say. I read the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying a Vampire last fall and really, really liked it. This is a haunted house leaning story, and personally speaking, when it comes to horror and spooky books, I really like haunted house leaning tales for some reason. Maybe it's because I'm a homebody, I don't know. But in this story, we're introduced to our main character who is really dreading going back to her family home after her parents have passed away. She doesn't want to go through the process of cleaning up the space and getting it prepared to be ready to sell. She doesn't want to go through her father's academic items or her mother's very strange and large doll collection. Freaky. She's also not really looking forward to seeing her brother, who has not left their small town, and they haven't really spoken much in their adult years. But she arrives and she's determined to work with him to get this house ready to put on the market. But the house has its own plans, and so begins this tale. Sounds so spooky. Next up, I also have Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. I'm so excited to pick this book up. I've been saving it. I knew I wanted to read it this year, but I especially knew I wanted to read it this fall if I could hold off. This is another haunted house-esque story, but it's more Gothic in its nature, which again is another thing I love so much in literature. In this story, we follow our main character, who is a glamorous and beautiful socialite. At the beginning of this book, she receives a very frantic letter from one of her cousins who has just been newly married, calling to her to please come visit and stay with her at her new home, as she is not sure what is going on and she's like very desperate and scared. So our main character decides to travel to this very far away estate to stay with her cousin. When she arrives, this once powerful and very rich estate has fallen into ruin. She meets a lot of very strange members of this family, including a brooding new husband, and slowly the house itself seemingly begins to invade our main character's dreams. Sounds gripping, sounds dark, sounds intriguing. I'm hoping there's a little bit of weird romance mixed in too. That's why I love Gothic books. It's like, why is there romance here? But like, why am I into it? I'm just so excited to read this book. Next up is a newer release, and it's another Gothic horror story by Isabel Canas, and that is The Vampires of El Norte. I read The Hacienda by this author last year, loved it immensely, and I just cannot wait for another what appears to be like very dramatic, very dark, very brooding story by this author. But this time we are centering vampires, and I could not be more excited. This is said to be a supernatural western set along the border between Texas and Mexico in 1846 after the United States attacks Mexico. This story follows our main character Nina, and she knows a thing or two about monsters in the night, especially because she was attacked by one 9 years prior on her father's ranch. We also follow another main character who is in love with Nina, who thought she died during this attack, and he like ran away because he was so deep in grief, and then they cross paths once again along the border. Again, vampires are included. This conflict is heating up. I truly am dying to read this book. It feels like it has so many inputs that I just need to read. I feel like it's going to be angsty and dramatic and gripping. I just loved Isabel Canas's first book, and I really feel like I'm going to love this book too. Next up, I have a dark academia novel, but I feel like I need a few more dark academia novels like for the season. So if you have some favorites, let me know. But the book is Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. This is the first book to a duology that is now complete, so I thought that would be great from a marathon point of view. But this story is set in a very dark magical school. The only way to get out of this school is either to graduate or die. There are no teachers, there are no lessons, friendships are strategic, and the odds of survival and making it through the day is always in flux. It's also my understanding that outside of the intense competition between students, the reason why the school is so dangerous is in your pursuit of knowledge, you're also pursued by some like dark monsters that live in this school as well. We follow our main character Elle, who thinks she has a great opportunity to not only enter this school, but also excel in this school, because she has like a once in a generation power that can like tremble mountains, but she's also keeping it hidden. And from there, I believe we follow our main character as she goes through the experience of being in the Sholomance. I'm intrigued by this. I've heard good things about it. I obviously love Naomi Novik's writing, and this is one I just haven't read yet, so I thought I'd check it out. Last book that is on my fall TBR sounds absolutely unhinged, and that is Our Share of the Night by Marina Enriquez. This author is beloved in South America, and this is actually her first work to be translated into English. I picked it up a few months ago, but had the knowledge that I wanted to save it because I felt like it would be a perfect fall winter read, because it basically follows like a demonic cult and a father and a son going on like this unhinged road trip with one another. This book follows our two main characters, a father and a son, both grieving after the passing of their wife and mother respectively. They decide to travel to her ancestral home because she kind of comes from a group of people like no other. It's a clan of individuals who are determined to find the answer to immortal life, and they will do unspeakable acts to get this answer. Upon arriving, the son realizes that this might be his legacy, and the clan wishes to possess him, and the father, obviously fearing for his son, decides to take him and flee once again, and this clan begins to pursue them. This book is said to like take place over a rather long period of time, jumping back and forth in time. It also is set in a lot of different locations, which sounds really intriguing to me. It really feels like it's going to be very dark, gripping, very strange, very like earth-shattering style of a story. It has so much praise. I'm just so intrigued by this. And I mean, the cover, everything about it, I just feel like I'm gonna love. Alrighty guys, those are the books I'm most excited to read this fall. Again, a big shout out to this video sponsor, which is Wraithmark Creative. If you guys want to learn more about the Legends and Lattes Kickstarter campaign, I will leave that link down below for you to peruse. But thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you soon with another one soon. Goodbye.